Hello, everybody. We're just letting people in right now. I'm going to turn off the waiting room so everyone can get in. Thank you for being here. This is the annual Nonprofit and Government panel that is hosted by Marxe Graduate Career Services and the Starr Career Development Center. I am here. I'm Marnie Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Career Services at Marxe. I'm here with my colleague, Suzanne Grossman, who is the Deputy Director of Career Services and Alumni Relations, and Ricky Weitzen from Starr Career Development Center, who is our partner in this event, and we love working with you every year to put this together. We are going to start with a short poll, which I'm going to launch right now. Can we see the poll? Okay. So for our attendees, we're just trying to get a sense of who's in the room. Are you a graduate student? Are you an alum? Are you an undergrad? And what degree you are working towards. So we're just going to give people another minute to fill out the poll. And I see the answers coming in, and then I will share the results with everybody. We'll just give it another couple of seconds. Okay, thank you everybody. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. Can we see the results?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we can see 38% grad students, 41 undergrads. We've got some nice alumni showing here. Looks like 48% undergrad. So Ricky, give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. And we've got some nice MPA, MIA, and MSED students. So this is a really nice kind of crowd. Okay, I will stop sharing now. And just to go over the format for everybody. So we've got our three panelists here, Jason, Alyssa, and Steven. I'm really gonna let them introduce themselves. We are going to do a moderated panel with them for about 40 minutes, and we're gonna leave 20 minutes for student Q&A at the end. And we are going to ask everybody to type in their questions into the chat, and then I will read them to our speakers. So you can put the questions in at any time, but your question might be answered, so you might want to wait a little bit. Okay, so I think we are ready to get started. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, including your name, your title, your organization, and an overview of what your organization does. Alyssa, will you kick us off?
Sure. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Really excited to be back and talking at Baruch. My name is Alyssa Alicino. I'm a double Baruch alumna, so I studied at the School of Public Affairs as undergrad, and I recently finished my MBA about a year ago from Baruch College. I currently work at the United Nations Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative under the United Nations. We work with about 10,000 companies globally to provide guidance along their sustainability journeys. So it's the corporate sustainability branch under the United Nations.
Awesome. Steven, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Steven Raga. Thanks for the invite. Graduate of the MPA program. Currently, I'm Chief of Staff at the State Assembly for Assemblyman Brian Barnwell in Western Queens. And a government office is what they do every day, and what they're responsible for might vary from office to office. But so I can speak directly with us, on behalf of us, and in general, a state assembly or even a state senate office to a large degree just has the responsibility is to make laws for the state of New York. But the added baseline of being lawmakers, we do have in our office a robust constituent affairs department, community affairs department, a community service department, internally a staff development department, and then offshooting into a year-round internship program to help, with a mission being to create the future public service leaders of tomorrow within our program. So that's what I do on a day-to-day.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Jason, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Price. I'm a 2017 National Urban Fellow and Master of Public Administration alum of Baruch College. Currently, I'm a program associate of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the nation's largest healthcare foundation. We work on some of the nation's biggest challenges to ensure that all in America have a fair and just opportunity for health and well-being.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. So to dive in a little bit more, I know you've given us a great overview, everybody. Can you tell us a little bit more about the day-to-day? And I know that may have changed since COVID-19 started. So if you want to include not only your day-to-day, but kind of how COVID-19 has affected that day-to-day, that would be great. So let's start with Stephen for this one.
Sure. So normally, especially for those that already work in a government office or who've had worked in a government office, there is no regular day. Every day is different from yesterday. But in the beginning of March, when this was when COVID started, rumors of possibly shutting down offices. To my knowledge, we were the first one to decrease our hours and shut down our office before the 10th of March. We were already locked down and doing that for both our Albany office and the New York City office. For the next 4 weeks after we started shutting down, and the whole state was shut down. Our workload totally increased. Usually we're working 24 hours a day. We're now 25 hours a day, talking to every other nonprofit, constituents, and also other electeds, community organizations, mutual aid organizations that need help, and also the hospitals, right? Our district is a few blocks away from Elmhurst Hospital. Our neighborhood, parts of our neighborhood are in the epicenter. So we want to make sure we're helping our constituents there. But in regards to the day-to-day, that really increased our workload. Although we have a large staff, that increased it immensely for the first, let's say 5-6 weeks. But in the last 2 weeks, it's kind of balanced off. Only because now we've done all we can on our side. We put all the requests in, follow-up requests for constituents, for agencies, for hospitals, for everything, for small businesses, that now we're just waiting to hear back. And whenever they have time and capacity, it'll help even that out. But definitely, it definitely has impacted our office to in regards to the cases we see. It's less about little stuff like, I need some guy's trees over my lawn. We still get those kind of cases, but we're kind of like, well, we got to talk to the hundreds of unemployment cases that we're getting now, which usually per month we average about 4.5 per month on service cases, specifically employment cases. Now they've risen in the last 2 weeks to 105 per month. So obviously those are our main targets now, so we can help our constituents and residents of the state of New York.
Awesome. Thank you for doing all that very important work and working around the clock for us. I know many of us appreciate that. Alyssa, will you tell us a bit about your day-to-day and how COVID has affected it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the manager for strategic development for a learning program, which is called the Academy, at my office. And what we do essentially within our office, we have different programmatic experts who really are the leaders in each of the spaces. So we have someone who is an expert on climate, someone who's an expert on ocean, someone who's an expert on human rights. So we have that across the different areas within corporate sustainability. What my job is I basically take all of that expertise and that content and make it into learning content for a corporate audience. So a lot of times you may be a researcher and you may be an expert in your field, but you may not know the best way to get the message across or communicate that information so that business leaders can use it within their companies. So I develop different learnings and trainings, whether it be from digital webinars, such as one like this, where we'd go over specific topics, or e-learning tools. kind of shorter clips or guides that people can access to learn about specific topics. My role has changed a lot since COVID has begun, as that's really shifted the way a lot of business has done business, and they're currently functioning, and has caused different interests in various topics. So now our trainings are all shifted towards COVID-19 responses. So we're doing a series for the next 3 months that's focused on COVID. So we've shifted all of our learning materials specifically. And similar to Stephen, for the beginning, it felt like, it was funny for the first couple of days. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I could stay home for a few days, gonna get a break. And then literally one day went by and my hours increased a lot. But I think now we're kind of figuring out what does this new work environment look like? What is our workload going to look like? And we're moving into our new way of working. So it's died down similarly a little bit, but it definitely has been affected over the last weeks.
Okay, great. And actually, Alyssa, while we have you, this is a question that I was asking Alyssa, which I think is a question many people have. So Alyssa works for the United Nations Global Compact, and this is the nonprofit and government panel. And United Nations Global Compact, I'm sorry, is, how would you explain how that fits in?
Sure. Sorry, I thought that was me. So essentially, the United Nations Global Compact is kind of a cross collaboration between a foundation side and the United Nations. So we have two folds within our office. So we have the foundation for the Global Compact, which is specifically here in New York City. So you can think of it kind of how UNICEF USA runs, where they have a foundation that does operations in a certain location, and then they work specifically with UNICEF Global. So we similarly have that duplex relationship where we are the United Nations Global Compact, which sits within the UN Secretariat. However, we have a cross-function between a foundation relationship and the UN. So like my contract or my employment is through a foundation, but I'll sit next to someone that's a secretariat employee, and we're all sitting under the same office. So it's a little, from the external perspective, you would never know that this dynamic exists, but it's a way to bring together different backgrounds into one office between the UN Secretariat and the foundation.
Thank you for explaining that. And so Jason, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your day-to-day and how COVID has affected that work.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I'm a program associate at RWJF, and as a program associate, I sit on the Global Ideas for U.S. Solutions team. And that team looks at policies and practices and approaches abroad and seeing how they may apply, how they may have some applicability here in the U.S. And since COVID has started, things have changed quite dramatically for us at the foundation. Generally I am used to being in in-person meetings, collaborating with my colleagues and trying to, generate some grant-making opportunities with different people across the foundation and with also potential grantees. And now, because of COVID and because we're a healthcare foundation, things have shifted in such a sense where we have been trying to repurpose some of our grants and get in touch with our grantees to see how we could be better partners with them, so that they can be more impactful for the people that they work with. With me and my position, I do a lot of supporting and development with the program officers and senior program officers on my team, and I have had to step up a lot with my role by coordinating a lot more with some of the convenings that we've been trying to incorporate. Some of the convenings we're not actually able to do on site because of COVID. We're having to do webinar convenings now. We've had to shorten some of our processes, and that has been quite intense with it, but we all are coming along with it. But to sum it up, it's been dramatic, I think, for all of us, as far as how COVID has changed and really affected how we do our day-to-day role at the foundation. And I could see it lasting throughout the whole year, even when we go back to the foundation, because still we don't know how COVID may play a part in coming back into our lives, and whether we will have to all go back to being at home again, and how that will affect our grant making, not only for at the end of this year, but also going into 2021.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so Jason, let's actually stay on you first for the next question.
Okay.
And I see that there's a question in the chat, which is a good segue. Everybody wants to know about everyone's background. Would you be able to give us some details on how did you get your current job, and what was the path that you took to get there?
My path was windy. So before I came to the foundation and before I went to NUF, I was actually a practicing attorney. I practiced law for about 8 years. I started off my career as a public defender. Then I went to private practice and did immigration, criminal defense, and family law, and was a mediator. But during the time while in private practice, I kept on finding, my clients getting to the same issues over and over again. And I was putting a Band-Aid on top of, a gashing wound. And I just felt that my efforts could be placed elsewhere. And so that's why I went into National Urban Fellows and went to Baruch MPA program. And while at Baruch, I had the opportunity to do a fellowship at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation as a National Urban Fellow for 9 months. And I was placed with the Healthy Communities team and the Global Ideas for U.S. Solutions team. And that's how I came into contact with my team members and with the foundation. After I left the foundation, I was kind of, just wondering, what am I going to do? I had no idea what, which direction I was going to go. But I took the advice of not foundation services, but the alumni services at Baruch, of really tailoring my resume, digging deep, looking to see what was best for me, and I figured that was really in philanthropy, and so I got a position with a consulting company that works alongside the foundation, and I did work for them for a full year before coming on board with the foundation as a program associate.
Awesome. Thank you. I think a lot of us have windy paths, so that's not unusual. I don't know if it's me, by the way. I'm just going to ask all of our speakers to just speak up a little bit, because we definitely want to hear everything you're going to say, and we want to make sure it gets on the recording. So Stephen, can we come to you? Tell us about how you came to be in your current role. What was your background? What was your path to get there?
Yeah, sure. So I haven't really worked in at least American politics or government before this role. I spent over a dozen years in the nonprofit sector, both locally and nationally. Did some fellowships at some law schools and internships at some law schools. Similar to Jason, I did a National Urban Fellowship. I was placed at ARP in DC, and then I was there for 4 years, and I working with legislation across the country. So, legislation dealing with families and aging issues, but specifically also the multicultural community. So I'd fly out to California, Hawaii, Texas, Florida, Chicago, to really work with grassroots organizations and see what legislative priorities they can work with or prioritize. But I always wanted to stay in the nonprofit side. I did not want to go and work for an elected official or an appointed official. But also a few years ago, there was a local gentrification. Well, there's always a gentrification issue, but where I lived in Queens, that would disparately impact the local immigrant community there, which is mostly Filipino, Ecuadorian, and South Asian. And so we put together anti-gentrification coalition at that time. And during our meetings, no elected officials would come except one guy who was running for office, this guy, Brian Barnwell. After the first 2 or 3 times, we're like, oh, he just wants our vote. You know how these politicians are. He's just going to show up and, put it on his Instagram or something. After a few times, you're kind of like, oh, I think he's just trying to really know. He's not trying to take up space. He's really trying to understand our issues. So help volunteer for election day for Brian Barnwell, and afterwards just asked me to be his chief of staff, which I did have to think about, do my due diligence and make sure it was the right move, because I was really happy at ARP. But it was just because of that. It's where you what events you involve yourself with, what networks or opportunities, or even virtual sessions like this you throw your name in the ring for, and you never know who you can meet.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so let's go to Alyssa. And Alyssa, I will say that I do see a question from Starlet, which is very much related to this question. So we want to know about how you came to be in your current role, your background, and then Starlet also added, how did it lead you to this training function?
Yeah. So I think similar to the other panelists, I definitely tried a lot of things before settling on one specific role. So I did a lot of internships. I interned at the U.S. State Department in Argentina. I interned at the White House in Washington. I interned here at Chamber of Commerce. I literally tried everything. I feel like anything within the public sector before getting actual employment. So I started out working at the City of New York for the Department of Small Business Services. And there is where I really started getting exposed to training. So I had to give a lot of training to small businesses. I developed a lot of training on the various topics there. And I realized I really liked the topic of training and making people have skills or equip them with skills that they may not have had if it wasn't for specific developed training. From there, I think from at least my city experience, I decided I wanted time off to think about what I really wanted to do. And during that time, I shifted to corporate sector. I just felt like I've always been interested in the private-public intersection. And I felt like even at the Department of Small Business Services, it was a little bit difficult for me to understand the private sector without actually working within the private sector. So I went to work for the private sector for a few years, which was a great experience for me, at least from a learning perspective, both from seeing kind of what happens within a multi-matrix organization, but also from getting to be I won't call myself an expert, but getting more expertise on the learning and development function and learning more what that actually looks like. And it was there within the Estee Lauder companies that I was able to oversee a lot of different training programs. When I started with them, it was when a lot of companies were trying to digitally upskill. So now companies are like over the digital upskill, but when I was there, it was like a thing where every company was going through their digital innovation, their digital upskilling. So I did that training for a year. And then I did a manager development training there. And now in my current role, it's a little different from a training perspective because this is training for companies. So whereas I previously worked for training for professional development or personal development within the company, now it's more from an external perspective. I would say as far as how did I make the different changes, I would say definitely my network was the number one thing that helped me shift from one to another. I've always been fond on keeping contact with people, and not so much from I want to talk to you about something specific, but I'm like a chit chatter. So I like to just like talk, get a drink with someone or get coffee and hear like what they're up to. And I think that actually worked in my advantage throughout the years, keeping the various relationships that I had. Because when I was honest with a few people, when I was unhappy or kind of what I was thinking about my current role, a lot of my connections then were trying to support me in moving in different directions. So I think, again, networking. I know people always talk about networking, but I feel like also networking is valuable when you're not actually looking for something as well, because then you actually form strong relationships with people that, will have your back later.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Networking is something we always espouse as part of career services. So thank you for reiterating that point. And so obviously we have a captive audience of grad students, undergrad students, alumni from Baruch, and you all are Baruch alums. Can you tell us, in terms of your Baruch experience specifically, were there leadership roles, were there activities or different experiences or even classes, like specific classes that you remember that you feel like were really valuable or set you up for success in your career? Let's go to Jason.
Yeah, myself. As far as, with National Urban Fellows, embedded with the National Urban Fellows, it's about leadership development. So there are classes and there are opportunities within it that provide and offer leadership opportunities for the fellows. With it, I would say with classes specifically, the leadership class that I had, I don't know if the professor's still there, I can't remember, Darwin Davis. He always really called on us to really step up and to get out of our comfort zone and to ask questions, to lead certain discussions. And I think that was really helpful because for me, I am an introvert, I'm shy, and that really helped me get out of my shell. Probably another one would be Parada's class. I had two classes with Parada. One of them was a stats class. The other one, I believe, was community development. And I never did some of the activities that she had, our class do before. And I thought that was really helpful as far as, taking the initiative and leading those discussions and leading some of our groups. And there was one other class, and I may have to come back at a later point to circle back with it. But I think there was one other class that gave me that was really helpful as well.
Awesome. And it sounds like
I'll think of it.
That's okay. And I mean, it sounds like the fellowship that you did through NUF is also like incredibly influential in your career.
It really is, because we're a cohort. I mean, you have the cohort of the people who come with you in that particular class, but also you have the full cohort of NUF members. And I think we go back as far as 50 years, and we all can call on each other if we ever have a question, or we need a piece of advice, or if we need some sort of information on something that could be helpful for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So let's go to Alyssa, who is our two-time Baruch alum, who came to Baruch and then came back. So what made you come back, and do you think it was helpful in your career? What was it about Baruch?
Yeah, I think for undergrad, at least, I was part of an organization called ISIC. So ISIC's a leadership organization that provides youth the opportunity to travel and to kind of have like leadership roles in almost like a makeshift environment, would you say? And I feel like for me, that was my opportunity to travel a lot and meet a lot of very motivated, inspired youth around the world, and really exposed me to a lot of topics that I hadn't explored, specifically within international development. And some of my best friends came out of us working together on these projects till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in the club room. So I think for undergrad, that was definitely like a highlight. I've also, I think definitely the kind of support from internship experiences that Baruch was able to provide me. So Michael Feller was a big support for me. He's a kind of internship advisor for a lot of different classes, and we still have like a weekly call just to talk about like how work's going and how different things are going. So he's been a huge support for me and for my career specifically. For my master's degree, I would honestly say was the people. From my MBA program, there was such a diverse range of people from the public sector, from the private sector, who all had work experience and were highly qualified in their role. And I feel like for me, it's super helpful just to talk about different topics with my fellow colleagues. So I think from Baruch, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to make relations because we're a commuter school. So you don't always have like a reason to talk to someone that you're in class with unless you have a group project, and then you're probably mad you got like groups with them and have to talk to them like on a Saturday night, probably about some random group project. But for me, at least, I made strong connections with a lot of different people within my MBA group. And I think that really has helped me to feel very strongly connected still to the school. I still have like a million group chats with all these individuals from my MBA program, and weirdly, we're still talking about like random things on these group chats. So it's been like a good mix of social, but also always having a diverse group of people I can go to if I do have a work-related question.
Awesome, definitely. And Stephen, tell us about your time at Baruch. Has it been influential in setting you up for success in your current role?
Yeah, for sure. Like the other panelists, the folks in your class, you know, your cohort or your classmates, you can make those lifelong relationships. I speak to them or message them frequently, actually, wherever they are in the country. But in regards to the classwork and the coursework, how does it impact my daily? It actually does. There's a few classes that I remember lessons from that I still do. Particularly, I don't know if she still teaches there. Brooke Ritchie Babbage, if she still teaches a nonprofit management class. I still use the book at work, the textbook. Whenever a civic or a nonprofit wants to advocate for something, but it's like, oh, I'm not allowed to lobby, I'm a 501c3. Well, actually, I learned at Baruch that you get 10% of your set. There's a whole thing. Definitely, her class was great. Strategy class, Doug Muzio, amazing. The communications class with Doug Weisenin. I remember we had to do an op-ed and a few write-ups, which I took, and now as part of the internship program in my and at work, they got to do that now. And also, what was great was foundations, and there was a philanthropy class by Michael Seltzer, and dealing with the nonprofits that I have to work with in the community. Sometimes they don't when they're just asking for the funds and they're trying to get the bottom line in place so that their employees have a job next year. Their foundation relations aren't up to speed. So definitely that really helped me on that class, helped me help others. And that's just a common thread in my experience in Baruch and what I do today.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Let's stay on you for a second, Stephen. So the next question is kind of related. I'm sure, you know, lots of Baruch students are looking for jobs and internships right now. What are the technical or soft skills that you think students should be developing to become, you know, really competitive candidates at this point?
Yeah, sure. But doesn't really, I mean, it matters what degree, if it's master's and undergrad, right? But to a large degree, I mean, I'm doing all the hiring, I'm getting all the resumes, I'm getting hundreds, actually thousands a year, hundreds of. At a certain degree, when you have all the qualifications, so do 80 other people. So when we bring you in for that interview, I very much deprioritize asking questions that are related to, you know, some of the hard skills that you're going to learn, some of that knowledge, the institutional knowledge that you can bring. I'm definitely trying to measure attitude, communication, teamwork, ethic, problem solving, conflict resolution, flexibility, motivation. Why are they in this field? Do they know why they're in this field? Half the people say, oh, I want to go to law school. So well, why do you want to go? I don't know. It looks nice on TV. I mean, like, if you don't have that down, I mean, we have limited spots, you know? So definitely, if my advice is to really find opportunities, whether, you know, maybe you could get an internship, or if you already have, to really highlight what you learned in terms of those soft skills, because more and more, especially in in more, especially more recent, like management articles, they're all about the more of a soft skill set and how you use that to prevent any conflicts in the workplace, internally or externally. So definitely that's something that folks should focus on. That's one. Number two, I would think, especially for us, I'm a millennial, proudly, but especially for the Gen Z coming out here, to really get that experience with more intergenerational experience with folks that have been in the workforce for decades, and bring in a lot of the soft skills that are needed to have that work flow and function every day. And learning from them is very essential, moving forward and getting the sufficient experience and skill set to build upon your career.
Awesome. Thank you. Jason, we're going to do the same question. Technical and soft skills. What should students be working on to prepare for jobs or internships?
Kind of going off what Stephen said with motivation, passion. I saw in the chat box, someone said, do you even need a master's degree to really get a job? Or is a master's degree even necessary? You can have a master's degree and not find a job. You know why? Because you didn't have the passion for the job you're applying for. If you don't have that passion, if you don't have that motivation, nobody's going to really take you seriously, because they're going to see that you are not really in tune and not really a part of what they are trying to do as far as that corporation, that business. Another one is emotional intelligence. You hear that all the time, but so many people are not able to really be themselves, or not really able to connect with people in the proper way, and they may toot out, they may act out. If you can't hold yourself grounded, if you can't be grounded yourself, then people will, they'll sniff that out, and then you'll be out. Another one is communication. If you can't communicate in a proper way, in the proper channels, meaning that you can't text in an email, in a professional email, they'll just think that you're not suitable for that particular role. And also another one is humor. People want to be around people that are jovial, that they can laugh with, not only work hard with, but laugh with. So those are the four that I have in mind.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely think having a sense of humor is key, especially when you're going through a pandemic like we are. Roll with punches. Alyssa, would you like to add anything about technical, hard skills, soft skills, what you think people should be working on?
Yeah, I guess from technical perspective, and I don't know if Steve and Jason have felt this as well, but one thing I never thought I would be doing so much in my career is making PowerPoint presentations. So like in all of the jobs I've held, I just feel like there should have been a class on how do I make a good PowerPoint presentation, because you literally need to present to like senior management, you're presenting to stakeholders, you're presenting to so many individuals. And I just feel like it's an underrated value of, if you have a good PowerPoint presentation, how people are receptive to you. And I think now, like the generation that's coming up, like you grew up with technology, so you might be a little bit more familiar with like graphic design and how to make things look nice. But even so, like I feel like there's still a lot being said for learning kind of basic how to make a good slide. So I would definitely say from making a PowerPoint presentation perspective, it's definitely a skill that I've learned I've improved my game over the years of how to make a good PowerPoint presentation. And echoing the other panelists from a soft skill perspective, I would say communication and attitude, especially in an agile environment. Like our roles are constantly shifting. So you might get hired for one thing, and then 2 weeks later you're posted on a different project, or you have to work on a different, on something different that wasn't necessarily what you thought you were originally going to be working for. So I think just making it clear to either the hiring manager once you're in that you're open to kind of move and shift where needed, because probably your manager and the rest of the team is also shifting, as moving as the environment is changing.
Great. Do you want to give us one of your top PowerPoint pointers, Alyssa? What do you think? What is
So
something
yeah,
people miss?
I would say like from a graphic perspective, like alignment, like making sure everything's aligned, horizontally distribution, horizontal alignment, fonts, making sure the whole presentation is the same fonts. If there's graphs, making sure they're graphically distributed. So like if you're having two pie charts on two different slides, don't have like a 30-70 distribution on one and then like a 40-60. And I feel like it sounds like little details, but especially for people like me who are a little anal with like how things look, it's distracting when you get like a PowerPoint presentation where the graphs look different and on different slides. And I would say also what I've seen a lot of people do is like post the entire report that they just created and then they just put it in a PowerPoint. And I think in school, like we tend to do that a lot. Like you wrote the report and then now you're creating the PowerPoint presentation. So you just copied and paste some of the text from the essay and then posted it on the PowerPoint presentation. Like the point of a PowerPoint is to give an excerpt. So it should actually be its own project in itself. So I think the less words you have on the slide, the better.
Excellent. Great pointers. Thank you, Alyssa, for that. So one more question, which I'm just going to have everybody answer very briefly because I know we want to get to audience student questions. Can you tell us just briefly about the interview and hiring process at your organization and how they've been affected by the pandemic? Let's do Jason first.
All right. The hiring process is a lengthy one at RWJF. It could be anywhere between 3 months to 9 months. And right now we are taking a pause from hiring because of the COVID pandemic. They want to ensure that we interview all the best candidates. So stay tuned for, if you go to RWJF's website, stay tuned for any new developments that may occur.
Awesome. Okay, Stephen, what about you?
Yeah, sure. It definitely has impacted our hiring. Actually, in right before the pandemic, maybe literally a week before, we hired 3 folks, and now it's all up in the air, unfortunately. But definitely, that's definitely impacted our full-time and part-time positions or available positions in terms of timeline. But in terms of our internships and fellowships, it hasn't actually. In fact, the opposite. Now there's, I have to start interviewing again, which I haven't done in a few years, only because now we're getting applications from across the country. And since we're set to do a remote, a full remote summer internship in case we have to be in the situation the entirety of the summer. So that's actually scaling up. And so in that regard, we're actually getting in more folks and having a bigger team from across the country and different schools outside New York.
Okay, great. And are you still looking for summer interns, or now you are set for summer?
No, it's so right now we're definitely still looking. We are. It really has to be. We're also instituting different like an interview process that definitely we're looking to focus on questions that identify, getting those soft skill perspectives outside of the the hard skill set that they have in their resume. So definitely we're still hiring and we're looking to scale up our programming actually. So if there's any questions, anyone can just message me and I'll forward them to my executive director who's overlooking this under me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, and we can connect also, and you can give me links to any opportunities, and we can send a follow-up email to everybody so that they can see what's available and what y'all are hiring for. Alyssa, tell us, how's hiring, how's interviewing going?
Yeah, so I think similar to the other panelists, hiring is currently on a freeze right now in my office. I think, at least from what I've seen, I think in June there will be a lot of reevaluation of what's the way to move forward specifically, because I think when COVID started, we didn't know how long it was going to last for, so the right away you freeze everything just because you don't know how long it's going to last for. I think in June, probably a lot of reevaluation of finances will be happening depending on what the like governmental advice on when reopenings will actually happen. But I think normally our process is pretty straightforward, like many other processes where you would first apply and then there's multiple rounds of interviews, both in person and virtual. The UN many times will just do virtual interviews. So like when I was hired, I actually never went into the office because they don't want to have any bias against how individuals may look from a facial perspective. So they want to learn more about you and your personality without having any kind of unconscious thoughts from seeing you. So I think there are different ways of interviewing specifically through the UN that may not happen in other locations. And especially within the UN, many people come from abroad to come work in New York and vice versa. So you might not meet your colleagues before their first day.
Cool. Thank you for that. Thank you. So now I'm going to go to the chat so we can get some student questions. I think, we can have just one panelist answer a question just so we can get through as many as possible, unless everybody has a burning answer they want to do. And then by all means, please give it to us. So first question is from Joanne Grell. This is a big question. How do you think this pandemic has changed the role of government and or nonprofit organizations going forward? Does anyone have thoughts on this?
Really quickly, I don't think it's changing the role at all. The roles, that's why we have that sector. That sector is there to fulfill that role. But I do think that both organizations and agencies are going to have multiple dozens of contingency plans for emergency situations, which I assume we already had after 9/11. But I think now folks are definitely going to instill that that plan, how an office can work if it's off-site, because this is something we've never done in a long period of time, right? And what that would look like. That's on the government level, because government is, of course, usually from the bottom up, and has to be a specific jurisdiction, a geographical jurisdiction. For nonprofits, actually, I'm looking at it. Your office might not have to be in New York. You might be able to hire folks that are in South Carolina who can fulfill a graphic design role. So for better or worse, that might change the face of nonprofits in terms of team composition, and if they're going to hire folks that are in the city, and people might not need to relocate.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Next question is from Gabrielle Bennett, who says, hello all, thanks for your insights thus far. What is your advice for those who have full-time positions, as many grad students do, and are looking for suitable positions elsewhere? So I think this means kind of a career transition into potentially doing something more meaningful. And maybe they don't have the ability to intern. I mean, Alyssa, I think, started already answering this question by talking about networking. Are there more details on networking we want to provide, or are there other things that we think folks can do to gain experience to make a transition?
I would say cold call industries that you're interested in, and just see how you can connect with people who may be working in positions that align with something that you feel that you are a part of. What's the harm in doing that? Because nobody knows that you're really passionate, interested in that particular role, that particular industry. So why not reach out to them? Reach out to the networks that you have and see what they know as far as that may be available. As far as volunteering, when you volunteer, make yourself marketable, so marketable that the volunteer service or the organization that you're volunteering for wants to hire you. How are you making yourself so presentable that they want to keep you on? I would say work the extra mile, do a little extra work, do something that showcases who you are and what you can do for that organization.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. And I think that actually answers another question we have in here from Suchi, who is asking about, if you are not confident about a field you're going into for an interview because you don't know that much about it, I think Jason's advice is really spot on. And, reaching out to people who are in the industry you want to be in, asking them questions, doing an informational interview with them, gathering some more knowledge so that you can be prepared and confident going into an interview and feel like you have something to contribute.
I would also make a a spreadsheet of the people that you've contacted, and just saying, yes, I've contacted them. No, I haven't contacted them. Using, a baseline email for, shooting out emails to them. More often than not, you may only get 40%, success rate, but that's 40% better than nothing. And you never know what one of those emails may result in.
Great point. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, question from Sandra Kuprat, who is our colleague at Starr Career Development Center. This is a great question. Knowing who you were back in school and who you are right now, what advice would you give to your younger self? Could be anything.
Breathe.
Breathe. That's a good one. Yeah.
I would say, like, don't try to plan so many years in advance of what's going to be your final career path, because you probably will change a few times before you get somewhere else. So just focus on like what you're passionate about in the present, because it'll probably change, or it might not, but it probably will.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And going back to Jason's windy career path, just like many of us, because dreams change. Question. Oh yeah, Stephen, go ahead.
One, what I would have done was, work on my GPA a little more. Secondly, I would have also tried to develop more of a connection with my professors that were working in fields that I was interested in. I really didn't do that. Just came in office hour, tell them my assignment was late. But I mean, if I really, really picked their brain on where I could be in the field, where the field is going, I mean, they definitely have those connections, and that's a relationship that could definitely be more impactful than any others on campus.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, totally agree. So let's see. Amy Harwood asked about volunteering. I see Stephen already put in some of his thoughts about volunteering and unpaid internships being a good way to get your foot in the door, because people can see what your experience is, and then if you're great and a job opens up, hopefully they're going to think of you. So great question and great thoughts from Stephen. Okay, this is a question from Abraham specifically for Jason, who asks, what is the most pressing health issue pre-COVID-19 that your team is working on now?
That's a good question, because pre-COVID-19, equity is, at the heart and center of all of our work. As far as the health issue, the most pressing health issue, I mean, that is so subjective, but I would say anything that does not have equity at the center, at the root of trying to solve or trying to find some solution with the issue or health, malady that's going on, I think that's the biggest problem, pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Okay, thank you. And this question, another question from Gabrielle Bennett, which I think is really for Jason and for Stephen, because it's about the MPA degree, is would you say that declaring an MPA concentration is advantageous or not? And also, did you have a concentration when you were doing the program?
It may be advantageous if you're looking to go into a particular role coming out of the MPA program. But like I said before, if you don't have the passion and the motivation behind what you're going into, it's immaterial. It doesn't matter. So you can have the concentration, you can not have the concentration. It's about what drives you, what is fueling you to go on to your next level.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree with Jason. My concentration was nonprofit management. But again, when you're in that interview and the hiring manager's looking or going through your resume, when you're already there, it's not, again, it depends on the work, on where you're applying, right? But at least if it was with me, I would ask a question on it and see why did you choose it? How's that impacted? What have you learned in that concentration? And if you can't have substantial follow-up reasons or to answer that, it'll actually, shoot you in the leg. But definitely, it really, I'd say, depends on where you're applying. It could not.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So Julie has a question specifically for Alyssa. Alyssa, you mentioned an internship where you got to work on training others, especially on learning and development. How were you able to land that internship? Oh, wait, I think you're on mute. Hold on, Alyssa. Let me, yeah.
All right, there we go.
There you go.
So it wasn't actually an internship. It was my first role out of undergrad. So I think for at least where I was working, we all needed to upskill ourselves to be able to train others. So although I wasn't like by any means an expert on small businesses, we did have training materials that we could study in order to teach others. So that was just part of the role that I was specifically in. But I think from a learning and development perspective, if training is something that is of interest to anyone, it is a field it's a bit like there's not necessarily an undergrad degree that you would study this. There are graduate programs, but I would honestly say you don't need a graduate program in learning and development to get into it. There are certain practices you could look up online specifically on how people best learn, because there are different, like the ADDIE model. There's different models on how people are actually receptive to learning, which I actually think is nowadays, like training is in a lot of people's field. It's not just in learning and development. So it's good also just to have a little bit of background knowledge on how people learn and how they actually can receive information.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. Stephen, we've got a specific question for you about how your responsibilities as the chief of staff are different from those of an aide or an associate.
In the same agency?
I think so.
Well, I think from office to office anyway, a chief of staff's role can differ. I have friends who are chiefs of staff, and they do, and I can say this because they tell me this, they do like a tenth of what I'm doing, and they say it proudly, and good for them. Like they're winning. But I think that for me, especially what Jason was mentioning, when you're looking for passion, I think that's what hopefully that's what we hire for. But in terms of an associate level and or folks under me that are working under me, mine is more overall coordination and legislation with the legislative process and overall management of the team between the Albany office and the Capitol and what we have in New York. And those two senior associates that are directly under me, one is Deputy Chief of Staff, who's focused on the constituent cases, because we're doing hundreds of constituent cases per week and churning them out and talking to agencies and constituents, especially in the last month or two. And then underneath that, there is an office of the Chief of Staff and the Executive Director over there. Her name is Victoria. She handles about 9 different departments under there. So for me, I'm just making sure that I'm touching base with the two directly directly beneath me in the district office, and while running the assembly, the Albany office. So it's just a different it's different in terms of roles and who we directly oversee, really.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I know that there are a couple more questions, but we have to hit 2 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of our panelists' time because they're obviously very busy working for all of us. So please join me in thanking Jason and Stephen and Alyssa This was really amazing, valuable information you gave to us. I'll follow up with our panelists if they're comfortable sharing their contact information. We can send that to you in a follow-up. Thanks, of course, also to Ricky at Starr Career Development Center for being our wonderful partner on this event. And thank you, Suzanne, and everybody involved. It was great to see you, and we'll send you the recording and follow-up details. And we hope you all stay safe and well. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.